In the trailer video for this presentation, we told you that we were going to expose how, after being charged over the discovery of 55 greyhound carcasses, this trainer, Narelle Mulcahy, and her partner, Bill Samuels, escaped animal cruelty charges, jail time, and being banned for life from greyhound racing. Anyone else who did what they did would have gone down with at least this much. Investigators had the evidence, they had the crime scene, the carcasses, the shell casings, the perps, and the guns. So how did Bill and Narelle get away scot-free with one of the biggest cases of animal cruelty in Australian greyhound racing history? And how on earth are they still racing to this day? And they haven't just been racing recently. Bill and Narelle have been racing greyhounds for a very long time, probably since the 90s, maybe even before that, but certainly since the early 2000s, before Doc even began seriously racing greyhounds. And they've been racing all the way through to present day. This is the news footage we posted earlier this month. This was from April 2015.
They're not racing anymore. I've confirmed that with the stewards this morning.
That didn't age well, did it? This is another article of the same story in the following year, in 2016. Now, this is the Greyhound Recorder website, and this is Narelle Mulcahy's profile, and this is just the top 50 greyhounds by prize money. And if we go into the history of just some of these dogs, you can see that these trainers, ever since before, during, and after being charged over the discovery of the 55 dead greyhounds, these trainers have been racing still all the way through 2015, 2016. All the way through to now. This is 2021, 2022, 2023, this month. Here we are on the Racing Queensland website. We're at Bundaberg on Monday the 5th of June 2023. This is race 2. There's Narelle. She's just put her dog into box 1. She got the good boxes today. And there's a dog coming in 3rd place. That was Rhino Buster. Same day, race 10. There's Narelle again. She got the good box again, box 1. And there's her dog again, Dunworthy Lass, 1st place. So how is it possible that these trainers are still racing? Well, put simply, Bill and Narelle have a get-out-of-jail-free card. You see, in 2007, Bill and Narelle colluded with corrupted officials within the Greyhound Racing Authority, now known as Racing Queensland, to stitch up this man, Doc Jamieson, in a false inquiry designed to destroy his image, drag his name through the mud, and stop him from racing greyhounds. Why? Well, as far as Bill and Narelle were concerned, it was because he was winning, and he was taking all the prize money. Doc Jamieson was kicking ass on the racetrack with rescued death row greyhounds, trained up with zero animal cruelty and, of all things, ice cream. In 2007, he took the Bundaberg Cup. Now, when you're a man of truth and integrity and you come strutting through an industry overrun with corruption, and then you go and throw a spanner into the lucrative works of a long-standing race-rigging enterprise, you make the best players in the game look like amateurs, and you're doing it with dogs that everyone else treated as trash, and all without cheating. You're going to upset some people. Now, it doesn't stop there. There is a much larger, overarching story which this case ties into. You see, there is a preponderance of corrupted elites across the industry, as well as dirty players on virtually every level of the game, all who have a common interest in bringing down Doc Jamieson, because Doc is the single biggest threat to the corruption hidden beneath the surface of greyhound racing. You have live animal baiting, the killing and disposal of greyhounds, the race rigging enterprise at large, which is facilitated by corrupt stewards, officials, and other members of the racing board who conceal their illegal ownership of greyhounds by having them registered in the names of their partners or their friends or other family members instead of their own. It's conflicts of interest across the whole game board, and because this industry is largely self-regulated, these cover-ups never come to light, except predominantly through this man, Doc Jamieson. Now, the GRA inquiry, instigated by Bill and Narelle, it came on the back of a lawsuit with the Chiropractors Board of Queensland in what was a strategic 1-2 punch. So Doc had reached the height of his career as an animal chiropractic specialist. He was well known and published all throughout Australia. He had a chain of clinics, and he even expanded into transport and kenneling. He started off small, advertising at racing tracks and travelling the country, proving his ability on racing greyhounds, and after years of hard work building his business, he had everything he ever wanted. And all that was left to do was clean up the corruption of the industry that he'd been so passionately supporting for his whole life. So in 1999, Doc held a meeting with Danny Ryan, the GRA chairman of the stewards, regarding the corruption in greyhound racing. The GRA chairperson, as well as Peter Cork, a Labor MP and GRA CEO at the time, they were also there, but they were in the next room, and Danny was a liaison going back and forth between them and Doc. Doc wanted to give them a chance, as he always does, to clean up their act from the inside.
In that meeting with Danny Ryan in 99. Well, I went there because about the race fixing and animals being blooded, greyhounds being shot, and all the stewards owning greyhounds in false names rigging races. And Peter Corky was the Labor MP. He was there, and Danny went in the room, come back out, talked to me for 15 minutes, went back in talking to him, and then Danny come out to me and says, "Doc, what do you want out of it?" I said, "I don't want any of your dirty money, mate. I want the game cleaned up, and I'm going to make sure it is going to be cleaned up."
They tried to bribe him. He told them where to stick the dirty money. Doc basically said that they needed to clean the corruption out of the greyhound racing industry, get rid of the live baiting, stop the greyhounds from being shot, prosecute all members, stewards and officials of the board concealing their illegal ownership of greyhounds and rigging races, or he was going to go public with all of his evidence. But the board didn't listen, and instead they decided that they would try to destroy him, set him up and knock him down. So they spent the next 5 years trying to find something, anything to set him up with, but they couldn't. They couldn't find anything because he has literally no skeletons in his closet and he never does anything wrong. So by 2006, Danny Ryan was starting to get worn down from having the racing board constantly riding his back to find something on Doc that they could use to hurt him. So during his next surprise inspection of Doc's property, there were a few of these because of false complaints and such, just before leaving Doc's property at Willowvale, Danny gave Doc a tip-off that the GRA was coming after him through the Chiropractors Board of Queensland and that the GRA were also going to set him up in a false inquiry.
Yes, Sarah, Doc Jamieson, how are you?
Good, how are you, Doc?
Yeah, not too bad. No, I just want to get on to Zach to clear. I want him to reopen it and clear my name.
Right, okay.
Yeah, you know, I've just had a gutful, you know.
I mean, I take it you've already spoken to Zach about this, have you?
I've sent so many letters. In the 3rd of February 2010, Zach got a letter with showing all the corruption. And also 14th of June 2011, Bob Bentley got, and I haven't had a response from any of them.
Right, okay. When did all this happen originally?
2007.
Was there an inquiry done at that time?
Yes, there was. What happened in 2006, Danny Ryan and Darryl Kay come out to my property. Kerry Watson sent them out to do an inspection. And like normal, my place was spotless. And as Danny was going, I walked out to the car with Darryl Kay was sitting in the car with Danny, and Danny said, "Look, I've been sent out of here by my boss, Kerry Watson, and she's also gone to the chiropractor board."
Then along came Doc's nemesis in the form of this woman, Kerry Watson, a very corrupt and very connected official in the GRA who we've also mentioned a number of times in previous videos. At the time, she was the deputy chairman of the GRA, and Kerry was the mastermind on the other side of the Cold War that was always waging between Doc and the GRA. So Kerry used her connections in the Chiropractors Board of Queensland to set up an attack on Doc. The Chiropractors Board opened a lawsuit against Doc for using the terms chiropractor, chiropractic, and chiro in his advertising while not being a registrant on the board. There was even a false complaint that Doc was practicing chiropractic on humans, which he of course never did. Now, the story of this lawsuit and the saga that followed is for a future video, but to cut a long story short, Doc won the case by virtue of the grandfather clause. Doc was found not guilty, and he walked away with every right to continue using the terms chiro, etc. in his advertising. But that wasn't the point. The point was to defame Doc, destroy his business, and that ordeal did take its toll on Doc. He closed down his clinics, he sold off most of his business assets to fund his legal defense. So Doc was down, but he wasn't out yet. There was still a lot of aftermath with the Chiro board to get through with a defamation lawsuit and even more internal sabotage, namely with Peter Boyce, the lawyer who we mentioned in the Maggie and Max video. This was on top of all the drama he was dealing with at Bundaberg at the time, which was all instigated by Bill and Narelle, as well as all the back and forth with his ex Rachel Thompson, who turned out to be a plant. But Doc probably still could have handled all this. And then, barely a month after winning the case against the Chiropractors Board, came the GRA false inquiry. And ever since then, Doc has been pushing a boulder up a hill, trying to clear his name and rebuild his business. In the inquiry, there were a number of false witnesses who gave testimony, but ultimately it was Bill and Narelle who carried most of the weight of the setup and got the ball rolling. And they did it with the most ridiculous of allegations, which we'll get to in a moment. But firstly, for context, in the beginning, Bill and Narelle were amicable, even friendly with Doc. When he was moving back to Yatala from Bundaberg, they helped him pack up his house and all his gear. They even agreed to look after and train his dogs for a few weeks while he was relocating to Brisbane. And in return for their help looking after his dogs, he gave them a fridge, a hunter blow-up boat with an electric motor and a battery, a couple of parrots, all up about $1,200 worth of gear and animals. During the inquiry, Narelle had the nerve to say that she had received nothing in the way of payment for putting up Doc's greyhounds. And just to prove the point, here we have a statement from a freelance journalist who witnessed the entire barter and exchange. But even before all this, Doc had loaned Bill and Narelle 4 portable kennels to use. They themselves had a lot of dogs and they also did kenneling for other trainers and owners. It took Doc almost 2 years after the inquiry to get those kennels back in terrible condition. Here you can see all the back and forth Doc had to go through to get them back. Letters from Narelle to Doc, no phone number, ever. Letters from Doc to Narelle, barrister deliveries, failed attempts at arranging transport. This document in particular gives some insight into the character of Narelle. It's a transcript of a voicemail message from Peter Walmont, a boxer breeder from Brisbane. If you've seen any of the YouTube or TikTok videos of Doc's animal chiro work, then you may have seen Peter. So Peter's parents, who live in Bundaberg, had agreed to an arrangement that Doc had made with Bill and Narelle for their place to be used as a drop-off point for the kennels. Narelle showed up at Peter's parents' place and this is what happened. Just had a phone call from my dad's partner in Bundaberg. The woman has come round today, very abusive. She won't give you the crates over her dead body, screaming, ranting, raving. Dad and his partner are just like, holy shit, what the hell is going on with this woman? When Doc was finally able to get the kennels back, they were nothing at all like the condition he gave them in. They were given in practically brand new condition, and this is how they came back almost 2 years later. Busted up, soaked in urine and feces. So Doc had to completely pull them apart and rebuild them.
This is a kennel I got to fix that Bill and Narelle in Bundaberg had.
I went to Bundaberg on Cup Day and I just got some papers served from the bailiff to Bill and Narelle that they have to pay me $500 for the damages of those kennels and why they lied in the inquiry. And I asked them some questions.
Yeah.
And I got a letter stamped from the JP from the Beenleigh Courthouse.
Yeah.
To say that I put that into the Supreme Court to say that everything got said is true and correct.
Yeah.
So I gave him a copy of that, and the bailiff rang me and said that he delivered it,
Yeah.
and said Narelle was really quiet this time.
Yeah.
I want my money for the transport and the damages list,
Yeah.
and my loss of wages. I haven't hit him with any of that.
Yeah.
And I said $500, and this can go to bed, and you must answer these questions why you lied in the inquiry, or otherwise this is going straight to the Supreme Court. And I gave them the proof that it's going to the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And the return of the kennels dragged on for so long because, of course, things had already gone pear-shaped before the inquiry had even started. The tipping point came while Bill and Narelle were still looking after Doc's greyhounds, and we use that term very loosely because they weren't really looked after well at all. Doc had received a tip-off about his dogs and that he needed to get them out of there ASAP. So Doc showed up in a surprise visit to check on his dogs, and he found them in the most atrocious state of care. Now, Doc's standard of care is of the highest standard in the industry, but even the disparity between what you'd expect from a so-called professional kennel business and what Doc found was shocking. Both dogs were put together into a tiny kennel, standing in their own urine and feces, sick, malnourished, injured. One of them had a big gash up his leg. Obviously, Doc was not happy. In good faith, he'd left his animals in the care of Bill and Narelle. They were in good shape and good health when he left them, and they came back in terrible shape. They weren't cared for at all. And the worst thing was that they came back with bloodlust because they'd been blooded. They'd been subjected to live baiting. One of the returning dogs killed another dog. This is Winsome Master, as soon as they were reunited, and just weeks before, they were best mates. They used to play together all the time. So from then on, things were never going to be friendly again between Doc and Bill and Narelle. In the lead up to and throughout the inquiry, Doc's spouse at the time, Rachel Thompson, was friends with Bill and Narelle. Now, the thing to understand about Rachel is that she was an insert into Doc's life. She was a plant. And you can see all throughout this transcript of a conversation between Doc and Rachel just how much in contact Rachel always was with Bill and Narelle. You see, Rachel was planted into Doc's life in order to sabotage his anti-corruption work and burn his evidence. Now, this is really all by itself a story for another video, but we can't talk about Bill and Narelle without touching on Rachel Thompson. So at some point in their relationship, Rachel began to waver in her resolve to go through with sabotaging Doc's life. And after realizing what an incredible pillar of truth, compassion, and integrity she was actually dealing with, She came out to Doc and told him everything. This is how come I know all about greyhounds, because my family history is all around greyhound racing. Bill Narelle said how they were going to set you up in a false inquiry with Danny Ryan. Kerry Watson, that's my mum's best friend for 25 years. And this is a statement from Rosemary Nissen Wade, who was good friends with Doc and Rachel during their relationship, just to give even more backing to this. So from here it starts to become clear just what kind of machinations were going on behind the scenes to set up and bring down Doc Jamieson. The first step in laying the foundation for this plot was to catch Doc in a drug swap scandal that went something like this. Doc attends a race meeting at Bundaberg with big money to put down on his dog Winston Master. Winston Master hasn't raced for 3 months, and the only 2 starts it had prior resulted in 1 last place and 1 failed to chase. Didn't even finish the race. And side note, those losses are going to be because it was nobbled. So on this day, Winston Master is muzzled and padlocked into the kennel block so no one can get in to nobble him before the race. And then what happens? Winston Master won the race, smashing the times of the other dogs by around 15 lengths. Now, under these circumstances, with a huge amount of money bet on him and a crap history, 1 last place, 1 failed to finish, and suddenly, after 3 months of not racing, absolutely beating the pants off the other dogs, there is no way that that dog should not have been swabbed. And until that day, Doc was always swapped.
Up in Bundaberg, when I was getting him ready for the Bundaberg Cup, and I bought him off Eric Haldane, and I got him right, and he had last, and I think failed the chase. I took him to Bundaberg to give him 1 look at the track, and then the Bundaberg Cup was in 3 months. So I took him up there, and there was the young guns on. 1 heat run 32.38. Second heat run 32.78. Winston Master, never seen the track before, come out and run 31.78, and I had a big bet on him. In your opinion, Ned, should I have been swabbed?
With that form, yeah.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Right? Absolutely, that's what I've said all along. And form reversal. I said to John Doss to the swab room, he says, no, I was talking to Danny Ryan this morning, and he said, what's Doc doing up there with Winston Master? He's a class dog, don't swab him. I thought that was a bit unusual because Danny Ryan should have no control over that. So I started to walk back to the swab room and thinking, I'll get swabbed. I get swabbed every time I'm there. And this time I should have really been swabbed because I had a decent bet and my dog run flying times. 15 lengths quicker than anything of the day, first look. Anyway, he said, no swab. So I walked back up to the kennel block at Bundaberg. So I'm going this way to the kennel block, kennel my dog, walked up the hill, 2 trainers there, Bill and Narelle, which were part players in the setup. Walked up and Narelle goes, Doc, what happened? How come you never got swabbed? I don't know. Asked John Doss. Danny Ryan said, don't swab me. That's what Doss said. Now, how would they know I never got swabbed? Because I went straight, after the race, straight to the kennel block. So there was straight away, I'm wondering what's going on.
And that was the interaction that was twisted into the allegations that instigated the inquiry. So the number 1 primary allegation was that Doc had, on a number of occasions, openly claimed that he was close friends with the GRA chairman of the stewards, Danny Ryan, and that Danny takes care of his swabs. Now, this just doesn't happen. Stewards don't touch swabs. That's purely a vet thing. Otherwise, it'd be a conflict of interest. In Danny Ryan's own words, there can be no greater indictment on a steward at any level. It does not happen. When it came out in the inquiry about what John Doss had said to Doc on that day at the track, about Danny telling him not to swab Winston Master, John Doss denied it, and not very convincingly. In later conversations one-on-one with Doc, he just tried to avoid the conversation altogether. At first, during the inquiry, he said he wasn't even talking to Danny on the phone about Winston Master. And then later, he's recorded saying that he was talking about Winston Master on the phone with Danny. Listen to this.
And then that day when Winston Master got swabbed, and I said to you to the swab room, and you just said, Danny Ryan run this one and said, what's Doc Jamieson doing up there with Winston Master? He's a class dog swab, don't swab him. I walked back, I said to the swab room, he said, not swabbing. I walked back, all I done is I said to them, they said to me, how come you never got swabbed? I said, ask John Doss. He said, Danny Ryan rang in this morning and said, don't swab him. I repeated what you said, and then they turned it around and said that I said that Danny Ryan's a mate of mine and he looked after me swabs. John, that's not what I said.
I don't say anything to anyone out here.
What? No, I know what they're like, John. And then you said in the inquiry it didn't. But you know what? I know Danny Ryan's your boss. I understand.
Danny didn't tell me not to swab the dog. Danny said to me, I queried the time, and it wasn't early morning, it was after us. And Danny Ryan said to me, the dog's quite capable of running that sort of time. It's a good dog.
Right. Well, John, how come I never got swabbed when I had a big bet on him and he run flying time?
I don't know. I mean, I probably had you look at swab up the day or something. I don't know.
Well, you've swabbed me every other time, and I don't mind that, mate. You can swab me every time, but you know, John, even Rachel, the photo lady, was there and heard you say it to me.
One of the staff at the club, Rachel, not Thompson, witnessed the conversation on the track between John Doss and Doc, but of course she didn't want to get involved because her job was on the line. Now, in an attempt to make this allegation stick, there was a substantial amount of very elaborate hearsay fabricated to support it, such as that Doc went around the club telling people that Danny had given him authority to spy on the club and report anything going on that wasn't in the best interest of the club. That he didn't have to take any shit from anyone, and that all he had to do was call Danny and Danny would take care of whatever. That Danny had coffee with him on a weekly basis, never driving past Doc's place without stopping in for a cuppa. And that Danny was like a father figure to him for most of his life and reared him from a young age. It was even said that Doc would reportedly go around pretending to be on the phone with Danny on a regular basis as a means to intimidate people at the club. But Doc never carried his phone with him at the races. All quite elaborate, all quite preposterous, but very elaborate. Really, it's just a joke to even begin to entertain or even attempt to argue against hearsay like this. I mean, what? Danny's going to drive 4.5 hours one way every week to have coffee and shoot the breeze with probably the most controversial man in the industry? In the inquiry, Bill and Narelle was saying that Doc was claiming it was every day. And Doc claimed that he was a father figure to and reared Doc from a young age, even though Doc was older than him. As you can see, Bill and Narelle were never blessed with any kind of talent for creative writing. And it gets worse. The statutory declaration by Bill and Narelle contains even more twisted accounts with very grand embellishments and events that never happened. There was an incident where Doc wasn't able to attend a race meeting in Rockhampton because his car was broken down in Brisbane, and Narelle wrote that he wasn't in Brisbane but instead at his home in Bargara. Well, here's the mechanic's invoice and the statement from the mechanic to disprove that one, and another witness statement to back that up. Narelle also wrote that Doc had assaulted her with his car at Bundaberg on Cup Day. Yet another distortion of actual events. Fortunately, Doc had Matt Green with him that day, who witnessed everything. Throughout the day, Doc was subjected to an appalling display of contempt by the clubgoers thanks to the bad-mouthing of Narelle. And it was all because he had the best dogs and he was winning everything all the time, ruining everyone else's race rigging in the process. There was also a rumour floating around on the day that Doc was a woman basher and that he'd assaulted his ex Rachel with photos of her injuries being shown around the club, which turned out to be an attempt by Kerry Watson and Rachel's mother Jocelyn to shift the blame from Rachel's abusive father onto Doc. The photos were provided by Kerry Watson to the club secretary Joe Rowe, who circulated the images, while Bill and Narelle supported the narrative, all quite nefarious. You see, when Doc found out that Rachel was the victim of physical abuse and child molestation by her... this is the word I can't actually say properly without upsetting the YouTube algorithm, but it starts with ped, it ends with file, and has an O in the middle. I'm sure you know what I mean. That's Rachel's father, Peter Thompson. This was obviously quite upsetting for Doc to hear, and he did what he could to protect Rachel and her children, inadvertently putting himself in the firing line of some of the most nefarious defamation that Kerry Watson has ever concocted. And this was actually ongoing since the Chiropractors Board lawsuit, as well as leading up to the GRA inquiry. So there wasn't much of any sportsmanship to be seen anywhere in the behaviour of the other licensees, because on top of having the best dogs and winning everything, which was ruining all the race rigging, Doc's name had already been dragged through the mud before even showing up to race that day. Doc was booed right through the cup presentation, and they didn't even give him the right cup because he wasn't meant to win. He was assaulted at the start of the day, almost ambushed at the end of the day, and driving out of the club, Narelle goes and walks right out in front of Doc's car, so he has to brake suddenly with the dogs on board. And then she's kicking his car and yelling abuse while he drives around her to get out of the club. And this is what Narelle twisted into the alleged vehicle assault. The other thing that Narelle wrote is that Doc was stalking her, driving up and down the road outside her house. Now, nothing that Doc does isn't very obvious. Basically, everything he does is put right out there loud and clear for everyone to see. If you've ever seen Doc's vehicles, you'll know their appearance is quite distinct and not very inconspicuous in the slightest. So with cars like this, you'd have to be quite stupid to be going around stalking people. And other than that, I'll just let Narelle's character speak for itself, of which, between this and the Peter Walmont voicemail transcript we looked at earlier, you can get a pretty good idea. But the key point that wipes all of this nonsense right off the board is this. Why on earth would someone who built his entire career out of the greyhound racing industry, who's made a life out of exposing cover-ups and corruption, and with a decades-long professional reputation of being a man of the most incredible honour and integrity, why would such a man incriminate himself in a blatant conflict of interest by claiming to be close friends with, of all people, the chairman, not just any steward, the chairman of the stewards? Like that's not going to blow up in your face. You would have to be demented. But just to prove his point, Doc garnered the support of over 100 people, including chief stewards, who all maintained that Doc had never and would never say anything so incredibly ridiculous. So these allegations were terribly weak, but even with Doc's stellar, unblemished reputation, as preposterous as these allegations were, the inquiry still went ahead. Now remember, the GRA had been trying to find something to set up Doc with for over 5 years, and they couldn't find anything because he never did anything wrong. So this inquiry, and the Chiropractors Board lawsuit before it, was the best they could come up with. Now Doc may have won the Chiro Board lawsuit because it was in a proper court of law and the proceedings weren't entirely within the purview and control of the GRA, but it still broke him. The GRA inquiry proceedings, however, that was utterly and completely a 100% setup, orchestrated and handled by the GRA themselves. Absolute Kangaroo Court. Everyone was in on it. The inquiry chairman, Cameron McClune, the chairman of the stewards, Danny Ryan, the Bundaberg senior steward, John Doss, of course the witnesses, Bill Narelle, the Bundaberg Racing Club secretary, Joe Rowe, was pulled into it and strong-armed into giving false testimony and lying her pants on fire. It was a total circus. There was basically no chance that Doc was going to walk away from this with a not guilty verdict. Now, the full scope of the unfolding of this inquiry is far too big for us to fit in a single video. It was adjourned 3 times with proceedings that stretched over the course of almost 3 months, from the 3rd of July to the 20th September. Now, you can be sure that the GRA had every intention of knocking this out of the park in a single session, but because Doc's armour of truth was so impenetrable and he was so good at defending himself, they had to keep adjourning, manufacturing witnesses, and the conflicts of interest were a joke. The Bundaberg senior steward John Doss was on the panel despite being a witness. The inquiry chairman himself, Cameron McClune, became part of the inquiry, so after the first adjournment they had to pull him out, relocate the inquiry to Brisbane, and get in a retired judge to take Cameron's place as chairman for the remainder of the inquiry. That was this man, Judge Ian Wiley, who had retired 6 months earlier in January. And even after being pulled out of the chairman's seat, Cameron was still involved in handling proceedings. Bill and Narelle were pulled out of proceedings entirely after the first hearing so that Doc could no longer question them. In subsequent hearings, they were pulling out surprise witnesses like rabbits out of a hat without giving Doc any notice or time to formulate his defense.
Well, I'm getting close.
And now it's time for another special feature.
Rachel Thompson, Doc's ex, was called in for the second hearing and strong-armed into being a false witness, complete with a false statement that she didn't even write and someone else had signed.
I was just so angry that I was set up in the inquiry with Kerry Watson and that false statement that you made. I shouldn't even...
I didn't make any statement.
Yes, what, you didn't do a statement?
No, I didn't do any statement.
What, to the GRA?
Yeah, I didn't do any statement.
Well, who done that?
No, I don't even know what you're talking about.
And all of this is just scratching the surface of the absolute comedy bonanza this inquiry turned out to be. Doc fought these charges so hard that it got to the point where Danny Ryan was willing to pull the entire complaint. As soon as Doc started to bring up the fact that the inquiry was a setup, Danny was spooked and he started actively trying to distance himself from being implicated by getting Doc to say on record again and again that Danny was not setting him up. So during an adjournment at the final hearing, the judge said to Doc off the record that Danny had said that Doc no longer had any charges to answer for. He could have ended proceedings right there and then, but Doc, being Doc, insisted on continuing because he wanted the truth to come out and for his name to be cleared. But even more than this, he wanted Pandora's box to be opened and for the corruption to be exposed and cleaned up. So what did they do? They disregarded all of Doc's supporting evidence and stuck the charges with a 3-month license suspension. And then at the end of the inquiry, after everyone else had left, the judge calls Doc back into the room and tells him again off the record that his hands were tied and it went over his head. He told Doc that he needed to lodge an appeal and that he should be taking the entire thing to the CMC or the Supreme Court, because the whole inquiry was, in Judge Wiley's own words, a kangaroo court. And if you don't know what a kangaroo court is, it's basically a mock court where the only verdict you're going to get is guilty. It was a total circus. Sometime shortly after the conclusion of the inquiry, Doc received an anonymous delivery of what was basically a comprehensive step-by-step on how he should go about lodging an appeal, as well as making a complaint with the CMC. It was so comprehensive that the only way you could write it is if you were privy to every detail of the inquiry. Wonder who that was? The simple fact that the testimony of two of the most corrupt and odious greyhound trainers in the industry with a history of animal cruelty and a reputation of being foul and obnoxious, that their word could be given more weight than that of a man whose character has been vouched for by over 100 people, including chief stewards, and with a career decades-long reputation of honesty and professionalism. That should tell you all you need to know about the corrupted state of affairs and how things work inside Racing Queensland. Now, the integrity of this transcript is very much in question. Doc had no end of trouble trying to get a copy of it and the tapes. The GRA eventually came back to Doc with a transcript containing an unusually large number of inaudibles, spelling mistakes, wrong speaker names, and according to Danny Ryan, the tapes were unable to be located.
Hello, this is Mary.
Good morning, Lizzie.
Oh, hello, how are you?
Yeah, real good, thanks. I was just ringing to ask if you knew anything what was going on about my file that I've asked, because I've heard nothing back as per usual.
No, I don't. I've just handed him, mate. I was not privy to anything. They don't tell me anything. But it was definitely handed him, and I haven't heard anything.
All right. I've had nothing back from Darren Beavers, like per usual. Liz, that's not normal what goes on in a board. Like, the board normally acts on stuff like that.
Well, I would think so, yeah.
The only thing I can think they're stumped with it.
Yeah, well, Danny Ryan said they don't know where the tapes are.
Yeah, well, hey, they said before that maybe Mr. McLean knew. Well, they said that earlier that they didn't know where they had to track him down. Well, he's right across the office from you.
Yeah.
And according to an ex-steward, the incidence of tapes going missing and copious amounts of inaudibles showing up in transcripts was not unusual. What's amazing is that there are some pages without inaudibles on them. So Doc went looking for the transcription contractor, which took him 8 years to track down. P&V Reporting Services, small business owners Paul William and Vicky Ann Carey, and when he found them, they of course also didn't have the tapes anymore, but in Paul's conversation with Doc, Paul did say that he actually had coffee with Danny Ryan on the regular, and that the GRA was corrupt as holy mackerel and that they should be investigated.
Paul, it's Jonathan from Animal Rescue. Yeah, you guys do transcripts?
We do transcripts on Racing Industry.
Oh, I do it for Racing Queensland and that, do you?
Racing Queensland, South Australia, New South Wales.
Oh, right, so you usually know Kerry Watson and Danny Ryan, or Danny's dead.
Yeah, Danny's amazing. He's a great bloke, Danny.
Danny's dead now, so...
Yeah, he was a real gentleman, Danny.
Have you heard the name Cameron McLean? He was a steward. I think he's on the trucks now.
Yeah, Cameron, he's been around a bit. He was thoroughbred, but he was doing some golf there for a while.
Yeah, that's right. That's back when Danny was alive, but...
Yeah, Cameron sort of went off the rails a bit.
Because they did say that he was punting and betting as well. And Paul, with transcripts, will you keep a copy?
We keep it for years.
Is there any chance, say one day next week, I could catch up with you and bring some stuff down for you to have a look at?
Yeah, no, that's fine. If you want to, next Thursday at 12 o'clock.
Yep.
Okie dokie.
All right, thank you, Paul.
Hi. Oh, hey, Paul.
Hi.
I met you yesterday with John.
Yeah.
How did you go with the 2007 audio?
No, good.
Not yet?
Look, Paul only types the transcripts. He can't request copies of it. If you want it, you have to go to the stewards and they have to provide it. And 2007 is just...
I've got nothing, no records back that far.
Oh, really?
No.
We keep it for years.
So if
do
we
you
can't...
have an email address? Because obviously John spoke to you. He wants you to do some transcripts for his business.
Paul's retiring.
Yeah.
Even though yesterday you said you would be happy to do a couple? Or?
Yeah, but no, I'm thinking no, I don't want to be responsible for any more. I used to be in the Supreme Court, then I went over to the Family Court because it just started up, and that's when they had all that trouble there. Judges getting shot and all that sort of stuff and everything else. There was a few problems there then, sort of thing, So then I've been doing some the stuff for the races and stuff like that.
Did you end up getting to...
Yes, it was very interesting. He used to work for the Supreme Court.
Oh,
and
my...
he also worked for the Children's Court.
So he's no dummy?
No, no way.
Wow.
He totally understands it all.
Yeah. Well, he was a bit shattered yesterday, wasn't he? So what did they say?
He doesn't have it. That he's just the transcript, and then he moves it on, and he deletes things, and that you have to go basically to the mother company. It's owned by Racing Queensland. You have to chase them about it.
Are they saying they don't want to do any of my work?
Yes.
Why is that? Because they know we're on to them, eh?
Well, yeah. They're scared.
Yeah, they're scared.
He told me his experience.
Yes.
Where he worked and why he got out of the court.
Why did he get out?
He told me that they were killing judges, so he got out of there.
Killing judges?
Judges, that was his words. He got out of there and went out on his own, and that's where he started doing transcripts for obviously Racing Queensland and other states, which he's been doing for 30 years on his own.
Yeah, so no doubt maybe he changed the transcript for him, mate.
Highly possible.
Yeah. Oh, well, we've thrown a cat amongst the pigeons, haven't we?
So first they had the audio and the transcripts, and they were going to do some transcription work for Doc, and the very next day they're retiring? Not looking very retired.
So there's something wrong with this orange juice.
But this is the kind of thing that happens when Doc tries to do his own investigations and request information. But still, even with the questionable integrity of the inquiry transcript, it's intact enough for it to be painfully obvious just how much of a mockery this inquiry was to natural justice. If you want to read through the transcript, this is just hearing 1 of 4. We're putting it in the website. The link will be down in the description below. You're going to see just how frustrating it was for Doc trying to talk all of the common sense that we've just shown you to the panel, because it was a setup, and literally everyone was in on it. Doc was constantly being cut off and talked over, poked and prodded, having his evidence and his arguments blatantly disregarded. They did everything they could to try and frustrate Doc, twist his words around again and again, trying everything they could to get him to trip over himself. But they couldn't, because he comes from the truth, and that's all he speaks. And when you don't have a web of lies to try and remember, there's nothing for you to trip over, because all you have is the truth. Halfway into the first hearing, they did manage to get Doc a bit flustered, and the chairman offered him a 10-minute adjournment to cool down. So far the way through, Doc was worried about his greyhounds that were still in the car, because it had been a long and unexpectedly delayed trip from Brisbane to Bundaberg, and he hadn't had a chance yet to toilet them. So he mentioned this when he was offered the adjournment, and instead of exercising any duty of care for animal welfare, which you would expect from an organisation centred around animals, the chairman completely disregarded Doc's greyhounds and only wanted to grant the adjournment if it was for Doc to cool down. Doc had to practically beg for a break, and even then the chairman would only grant 5 minutes. So by now, with this and all of our previous videos, it should be pretty clear just what kind of forces Doc has been fighting against all of these decades, just how entrenched the corruption is behind the greyhound racing industry, and just how extensive their connections are into the legal system. Now, as we've already shown you in previous videos, Doc has been exposing corruption and delivering evidence through every single avenue of submission: law enforcement, industry regulation, the Crime and Corruption Commission, the ministers, the Senate, Attorney Generals, all the way up to the Governor General, and it's been covered up every single time. The events detailed in just this presentation alone represent a fraction of the hardship that Doc Jamieson has had to endure throughout his lifetime and decades of protecting the animals and simply standing in the truth. He's lost everything multiple times over. He's had 24 of his animal companions poisoned and killed. All the way through, he's been intimidated and harassed. It's an absolute miracle that this man still has any amount of softness or compassion left in his heart for humanity. It's because of the greed and evil of people like Bill and Narelle that genuine human beings like Doc Jamieson have to suffer in order for the truth to come out. The entire ordeal with the Chiropractors Board lawsuit, the GRA false inquiry, all the defamation and attacks on Doc, the whole sordid nightmare was a setup from day one. And if it wasn't for Bill and Narelle and the fundamental role that they played in all of it, by now Doc surely would have had his business back on track with a few clinics back up and running, and who knows, even the greyhound racing industry might be a lot cleaner and far less corrupt than what it is today. On top of all the animals they've blooded, all the greyhounds they've killed, probably more than just the 55 we know about, a lot of animals and their owners have had to suffer not being able to get Doc's help because of what Bill and Narelle did. After the inquiry, the Cold War with Bill and Narelle was ongoing. Doc continued to investigate them for animal cruelty, race rigging, and other corruption. All the while, they were still trying to take Doc down through their corrupt connections. And to confirm how connected they actually were, in 2012, Doc set up a test at the Bundaberg Racing Club one evening by showing up to consume a lot of bourbon in full view of Bill and Narelle. And this was to bait them into tipping off the police to target Doc when he left the club. Of course, he didn't actually drink anything, he was just tipping his bourbon out in the men's. But sure enough, straight after leaving the club, Doc was flagged down by what appeared to be an innocent RBT stop. And the way it unfolded was very unusual. Straight away, the officer asked Doc for his license. You don't usually get that at an RBT.
Yeah, good sir. Sorry?
Got a licence?
Probably in here somewhere. You have to look for it.
So while Doc's trying to find it, the police officer goes back to his car to get on the radio.
No,
I'll come back in a sec, mate.
Alright.
Meanwhile, car after car keep on passing through the RBT. The officer eventually comes back for a breath test. Doc blows a 0.
No, it'd be in my work bag, but I've got stuff there, mate. I'm I'm a business. Have a look, I'm animal chiropractor, mate.
A lot of businesses.
Hey? Well...
Still haven't got a licence, yeah. Okay, that's both of there. Rightio.
Yeah, no, I have, mate. I've businessman, you know. Yeah. Yeah, it's in my work bag. Not working today, see?
Yeah, where's your work?
All over. I'm animal chiropractor.
Oh, yeah.
That's why I got dogs.
What's your full name?
John William Jamieson, 14th to 4th, 1958.
J-A-M?
J-A-M-I-E-S-O-N.
Date of birth?
14th of the 4th, there is 1958. Yeah,
Then the officer goes back to his car and gets on the radio again. Car still passing on through. The officer comes back for another breath test and Doc blows 0 again before being allowed to drive on.
Yeah. Yeah, mate. Yeah. How come you done 2 tests on me?
Right?
How come you done 2 tests on me?
I get you before, did I?
Well, no, I blew in the bag.
Yeah.
And I was right.
I just thought I hadn't done it, that's all.
No, because I've been picked on a bit lately, that's all.
Oh, have you?
Yeah, so I just thought you were harassing me a bit, that's all. But you weren't.
No, I just bloody didn't.
All right,
I get the license.
No, well, you done me first. You done me first.
Yeah.
Then you redone me.
Oh, right.
All right.
You might have had a little drink while I went up the back there.
Oh, well, I don't think so. Businessman.
Highly unusual handling of an RBT. And very strange for a police officer of all people to not realise that he's already breath tested someone. But in Doc's life, this is run of the mill.
When I left here, the last time before, I was drinking bourbons. Right, I tipped the bourbon out and I was drinking water, right? On the way out home, the cops were waiting for me. They bagged me twice. I had a big laugh about it. Who did that? You know, it would have had to come from the club here. Because they thought I was drinking. I wasn't. I'm not that stupid, so.
None of this, though, was enough to stop Doc from getting what he needed, and eventually he was able to procure the evidence he needed to tip off Crime Stoppers, which led to the discovery of the 55 dead greyhounds and the raid on Bill and Narelle's property. But they're still racing, and here is exactly why. Because if Bill Samuels and Narelle Mulcahy go down for the 55 greyhounds they killed, and they start singing about being false witnesses, then everyone else who colluded in setting up Doc or helped cover it up, that's Joe Rowe and John Doss, Darren Beavis, Rachel Thompson, I'd say Danny Ryan and Cameron McClone, but they've both since passed on, any of the other GRA or Racing Queensland officials who were involved and their connections, and, of course, Kerry Watson. The whole freaking lot of them will go down with Bill and Narelle, and then every other cover-up Racing Queensland has ever had a hand in will get dredged up, and it'll be open season of biblical proportions on corruption and the greyhound racing industry and all of its government and other connections.
Hello, Sarah, how are you? I've never received me renewal.
Yeah, I don't know.
Can I pay for it now?
Yeah.
I also got a stub master, hey?
Yeah.
Oh, you've done
if you want to renew both of
Yeah,
those, I'll
please.
put both of those on there. Right, so we need details. Have you ever been disqualified, suspended, warned
Yes,
off?
when I was set up by Kerry Watson in
Is
2007.
as per RQ records?
Can we put that in there, please?
Yeah, okay.
When I was set up by Kerry Watson in 2007, because she's got records of that anyway.
Yeah, I know. By Kerry, who was it?
Watson. She was the chairperson, and Danny Ryan.
Danny Ryan, anybody else?
John Doss.
Okay.
Joe, the secretary of Bundaberg Greyhound Club.
Joe Rowe.
Yep.
Okay.
Bill Samuels from Bundaberg, and then Narelle
Mulcahy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're the ones that actually started it with
Kerry
So
Watson.
this is when, 2009?
2007.
2007.
That's that inquiry I wanted open, remember?
I remember you telling me about it. Right, okay.
Date today, 18th.
Is the 18th of the June, yeah.
14.
Yep.
I'll get these
All
grant.
right,
And
yeah.
can I also get you to give this to, who's the boss now, David?
Is it David Van der Giesen? Yeah.
Can you just...
Do you want me to copy one?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
just sign, say I handed that to you. Just to
Okay.
say it's been received,
Oh,
that's
yeah,
all.
yeah, no problem.
All right, thanks, Sarah. Okay, went into the Racing Authority, Racing Queensland on Wednesday. Delivered a letter saying I want my inquiry open, I want a media release, and I want everyone held accountable. Gave them until close of business yesterday to be acknowledge it. I spoke to Dave there. He said he would pass it on, and like normal, no response. I told him that I'm going to open Pandora's box, and the media, if this wasn't dealt with, this time I've been patient since 2007 when I was set up by Kerry Watson, Danny Ryan, John Doss, Narelle, Bill, trainers up in Bundaberg, and Joe, the secretary of Greyhound Club, and Darren Beavers, all played a part in it, plus many others of Kerry Watson's gang. This needs to be dealt with now. I'm going to go to the next level now and send a letter to every Greyhound track, and with the petition signed so everybody can see other people, the public, this is in the public interest, wants to have this inquiry open and my name cleared. So next step, boys, here it comes. I warned you, you're not going to bully me out of greyhound racing like you have a lot of the other licensees. You never will. I've done nothing wrong by being set up. I want my name cleared and I want compensation paid. And I don't care whether you've got the mainstream media tied up, because I'm quite aware of what goes on with the government and that, but I'll do it my way and it will get out there. And then they're going to be held accountable why they covered it up, because the Courier Mail, the Bulletin Australian, has got my evidence and had it. Current Affair knows about my evidence. 60 Minutes, Four Corners, a whole lot, and it's been covered up from day dot. The Attorney General knew about my evidence. He sent my evidence back and didn't want to look at it. And he was investigating, actually, the Racing Queensland Industry. So, all right, let's see where this one goes. This has been going on since 2007. It's time for closure, guys. Deal with it, fix it. And fix it now. Yeah, is Zach Bryson there, please?
No, I'm sorry, he's unavailable at the present moment. Can I get him in, take a message and get him to give you a call?
Yeah, well, it's Doc Jamieson here.
Yeah, and what's the...
Well, what I want Zach to do is, in 2007, I set up in a false inquiry, which everybody knows about.
Sorry, you were set up in a what?
A false inquiry.
You were set up in a false
Yeah,
inquiry?
with Kerry Watson.
What do you mean by you were set up in a
Well,
false
listen,
inquiry?
actually, I'm not going to run back for it. Just tell Zach, can he email me that it's Doc John.
No, he'll give you a call.
No, I don't want a call. I want to.
Can I get him to give you a call?
No, I want him to email because. No,
I'll get him to give you a call. What's your
well, you won't be, because I don't want him to talk to me. I want him to email him. I want him to email me, and I want my name to be cleared. Otherwise, I'm going to the media. I've lost a lot of money with this setup with Kerry Watson.
So if that doesn't email you, you're going to the media?
Oh, well, I tell you...
Okay, all right then. Well, I'll pass the message on
What do
for
you
you. Thank you. I'll pass the message on to him for you, Doc.
Well, you think I'm joking, do you?
No.
I've had dogs poisoned along the way here. I've had me cat poisoned. I've had it.
He's unavailable at the present moment. I will get him to make contact with you.
He's not
available at the moment.
Do you think he's above the law, do you?
No,
You know what? I tell you what, Joel. This is going to stop right now today. I'm going all the way now.
Doc, I will get Zach to make contact with him.
Piss off. I'm going all the way.
If Doc was just doing all this for himself, there's no way he'd have been able to go for as long as he has. It's for every animal and greyhound without a voice, for every honest greyhound owner or trainer, punter who's ever had their voice silenced, for every person with their hands tied in law enforcement, council, regulation, and every level of government, for anyone who just wants to see the corruption cleaned out of the greyhound racing industry and all the systems propping it up. When no one else could or would do it, Doc refused to be silenced, and he put himself on the front line, withstanding everything that's ever been thrown at him.
You just don't know when to give up, do you? I can do this all day.
Because if he didn't, we wouldn't have all the evidence we have now, and we'd never have been able to expose how real and how deep the swamp of corruption is hiding beneath greyhound racing. And now, under the surface of greyhound racing, the wheels have come off the wagon. The swamp of corruption is drying up, and all the cockroaches and parasites living there have run out of places to hide. For every animal and greyhound lost, for every cover-up, every voice they've ever tried to silence, the time has come to pay the piper. There's no need to be afraid to speak up anymore because Doc's already done all the hard work so that we could open Pandora's box and take it all public. And they've got nothing left to throw at him. So if you have been victim of intimidation and harassment or having your voice silenced, don't allow corruption to silence your voice any longer. Get in touch with us at Phoenix Task Force, admin@phoenixtaskforce.org, and stand together with us to clean up greyhound racing in Australia in 2023. Once and for all. Subscribe for more because we're just scratching the surface and we've yet to go much, much deeper.